The final item of business today is the members' business debate on motion number 4877 in the name of Kim-Eadie on Lothian Sound Talking Newspaper celebrates 25th anniversary. This debate will be concluded without any questions being put, and I would be grateful if those members who wish to speak in the debate could please press the request to speak buttons as soon as possible. I call on Kim-Eadie to open the debate. 7 minutes, please, Mr Eadie.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I would like to begin by saying how delighted I am to have secured this debate and to thank members from across the Chamber who have supported the motion congratulating Lothian Sound on their 25th anniversary. This is a fantastic achievement, a significant milestone that we will celebrate later on this evening at a reception to be hosted in the Parliament. 25 years ago, almost to the day, a group of like-minded people came together to hold the inaugural meeting of what is now a much-valued service to hundreds of blind and partially sighted people across Lothian and beyond. I know from my own mum, Helen Eadie, who was registered blind in her later years through age-related macular degeneration, just how much she appreciated her talking newspaper, and I know that this service, pioneered by Lothian Sound, is cherished by people across Scotland. Of course, none of this would be possible without the volunteers who give of their time for the benefit of others, and I would like to take this opportunity to pay tribute to all of the volunteers and to thank them for the work they carry out. I am pleased that so many have joined us in the public gallery to listen to this debate. I would also like to pay tribute to one special lady, Susan Wallace, who is with us in the gallery and who deserves particular recognition. Susan was a founder member of Lothian Sound 25 years ago and is still an active volunteer today. Lothian Sound has achieved much in that time. Since 1988, the charity has produced over 1,200 editions and distributed them to hundreds of listeners. This service is delivered free of charge and distributed through the Royal Mail's Articles for the Blind arrangement, which I know brings much enjoyment to many people in my constituency and across Lothian. Lothian Sound has worked hard to ensure this service reaches as many people as possible. Back in 1988, they sent tapes to 40 visually impaired people. Now their listenership is in excess of 500 and is composed of those living in Lothian and those further afield who still keep an interest in what happens in Edinburgh and Lothian. I understand one of the original listeners, Jennifer Meiklejohn, is with us today and that she still receives her recording with great anticipation. Recordings are mostly taken from the Edinburgh Evening News and are aimed at helping blind and partially sighted people keep up to date with what goes on in their city and around Lothian. As an MSP for an Edinburgh constituency, I am happy to report that it isn't just the Edinburgh Evening News that listeners enjoy. Lothian Sound also record a popular Scottish quiz, and they are also keen to make sure that blind and partially sighted people do not miss out on the rich variety of cultural experiences which Edinburgh provides throughout the year as well as during the festivals. For example, through the Federation of Scottish Theatres, they advertise audio-transcribed descriptions of productions taking place in Edinburgh and theatres further afield, such as the Brunton Theatre in Musselburgh. The value of such a service should not be underestimated. In the words of the Royal National Institute of Blind People, RNIB, listening to a talking newspaper is one of the things that people can enjoy without having to rely on anyone else. That feeling of independence is so important. Indeed, this service plays an important part in fostering that feeling of independence, allowing people the chance to feel connected to the place they live, and does much to lessen the feeling of isolation which people can feel, and to allow them to connect to the world around them. And it isn't just about keeping up to date with news or current events. Stephen Fry is a well-known supporter of the medium of talking books and is patron of listening books. What he says about the value of such a service could apply equally to talking newspapers. He says with his characteristic eloquence, "The companionship and delight of a voice telling stories is incomparable. It distributes pure, undiluted pleasure and friendship. Not many schemes can make such a claim." Or as one listener to Lothian Sound puts it simply, "The readers are just like friends to me, visiting my home every week." There are 5 different reading teams made up of 7 people, all volunteers, who work together to achieve the professional standard that Lothian Sound's listeners enjoy. Reading takes great skill, especially as the readers don't see the articles until they are about to read them. Of course, there can be moments when readers are caught off guard, but their professionalism always shines through. Lothian Sound have always moved with the times, and in 2008 they made the change from analogue to digital recording. I understand that this has increased the quality of their recordings, as well as allowing the use of compact discs. However, as ever, the charity is alive to the needs of its listeners and still offers cassette tape recordings to those that prefer them. During April 2012, Lothian Sound made the move to a property in Newington owned by the Royal Blind School, where they have use of a quiet and tranquil environment for each week's recording. As a charity, Lothian Sound is funded by donations and through fundraising. Directing the organisation is a committee of trustees, headed up by a very able chair in Janelle, Scotland. The role of a trustee is important, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank them too for the work they undertake on behalf of Lothian Sound. My parliamentary colleagues from other parts of the country will be aware that there are other talking newspapers across Scotland. In fact, colleagues have been keen to let me know about organisations in their own constituencies, and it is right that our national parliament gives recognition to this vital lifeline service. The Association of Talking Newspapers offers help and guidance to all 65 talking newspapers across Scotland. They provide training opportunities and host an annual conference where volunteers pick up tips from colleagues and learn about recent developments in recording. I think we can all be proud that our own Dennis Robertson, MSP, will be one of the guest speakers at this year's conference in October. Presiding Officer, on this, the 25th anniversary of Lothian Sound, it is entirely appropriate that we should recognise the invaluable contribution which this remarkable organisation and others like it has made to enriching the lives of thousands of blind and partially sighted people across Lothian and throughout Scotland. The right to acquire knowledge and to participate in the world around us is something that we all have a right to enjoy. This is a right that Lothian Sound have made and continue to make a reality for many people, and we thank them for it tonight.
Thank you. I call Malcolm Chisholm to be followed by Fiona MacLeod.
Presiding Officer, I'd like to join with Kim-Eadie in congratulating the valuable and remarkable ongoing work of Lothian Sound, a newspaper, as Kim-Eadie has told us, for the blind and partially sighted, established in 1988. At present, the paper, run by a group of over 60 dedicated volunteers, is distributed at no cost to the listener to 550 people throughout the region. Even the postage is free thanks to the Post Office Articles for the Blind arrangement, although there are, of course, running costs that require funding from generous donors. Tapes giving news, updates and features are distributed on 50 weeks of the year, helping listeners to keep on top of current affairs. As politicians, we in this chamber like to keep in the loop. We value the ability to remain connected with what's going on in the world around us, and therefore I do not think any of us would underestimate the good that such a resource can do in keeping blind and partially sighted people in touch with the issues of their locality and further afield. Most of the population who have full sight, I'm sure, would be quick to complain where their newspapers, magazines, periodicals and other sources of information, so important for ordinary day-to-day living, suddenly withdrawn. There cannot be any just reason why those who are partially sighted or blind should have to make do without reading material available to others in an era of digital communication and enhanced connectivity. What is so wonderful about the resource supplied by Lothian Sound is that they deliver direct to the individual. Many people live in properties that do not, as of yet, have access to the internet. And while some listening papers and blind resources have rolled out online at a UK level, for example, the National Talking Newspapers and Magazines charity, services are still required that bring the news on tape direct to the front door. The benefit that this brings to individuals who may otherwise be cut off from this vital link is immeasurable, and after 25 years of building and strengthening their exceptional service, Lothian Sound do indeed have much to celebrate. They also regularly run social events which bring together listeners, volunteers and professionals from the blind community who give informative talks. This is all part of the process of keeping blind and visually impaired citizens informed and linked in with others who have direct experience of mutual concerns and issues. Above all, the inclusive process is enjoyable, sociable, and contributes to a greater sense of belonging and well-being. Keeping in the loop not only benefits the intellect, but the added social element of what Lothian Sound does also increases mental well-being for those 550 listeners. Direct contact between the senders of the tapes and the listeners strengthens the relationship between the groups and reminds both of why the work is so valuable. If anyone wonders about the psychological benefits speaking newspapers bring and the positive impact on individual well-being that results from regular listening, you only have to glance at the feedback given to the Royal National Institute of Blind People to understand how valuable these services are. When asked what they have gained through being included in mailing lists, the following responses were given. I love talking newspapers, somebody says. Now I can no longer read. They are my lifeline. Your service brings it into my living room, a local newsagent, another said. It's so accessible and totally portable. You sit on the bus and plug in your headphones and you're reading your magazines like anybody else, somebody else said. And finally, final quote, a lot of those magazines I took in print form I had to gradually give up. To have them back again is great. It reopens a world I thought was closing. This goes straight to the heart of why we are celebrating Lothian Sound today. For 25 years it has been a lifeline to hundreds of residents in the region, driven by the work of dedicated and inspirational volunteers. Its success over the years is reflected in its accolades. Lothian Sound has won the Scottish Tape Competition newspaper section in 1994, 1996, 2000, 2002 and 2006. Surely something that we all applaud, and the charity and its volunteers should feel rightly proud of their accomplishments. In conclusion, blind and partially sighted people have the same rights and needs as any other fully sighted person as far as their ability to communicate with the wider world is concerned. We now know that 550 individuals do have that ability, thanks to the work of this wonderful group, and I am delighted to congratulate the group and Kim-Eadie for bringing forward this motion.
Thank you. I now call Fiona MacLeod.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I begin by thanking Jim for bringing this incredibly important issue before Parliament today, but also for his eloquent and informative speech, which I'm sure everybody not only enjoyed, but got so much added information from. I think it's also important that I congratulate Lothian Sound, and I hope that they don't mind that I am going to use this opportunity to talk about talking news within my own constituency, but I do congratulate them on their 25th anniversary. And of course the Chamber won't be surprised that as a librarian, this ability to bring access to information and recreational reading to those who are having difficulty reading print is incredibly important to me. I first knew about this in a personal rather than a professional capacity when I was an MSP way back in 2000, when Strathkelvin Talking newspapers in my constituency, who cover Kirkintilloch and Bishopbriggs, invited me along to read. And as Jim says, it's a very professional thing to be able to read for the Talking News. I wasn't invited back, so I don't think I was that professional. What I was, though, I was invited back in 2011 to celebrate Strathkelvin Talking News' 30th anniversary. I'm not doing one up, promise. It's just we've had our 30th anniversary. I thought I was going along to present certificates for long service and to thank the volunteers for what they were doing. I did get to do that, but then I had to spend the next 2 hours serving tea at the coffee morning to make up the money to put for the funds to continue. But of course I didn't mind doing that. We have a fantastic team at Strathkelvin Talking News. Our new chair, Sandra Ketteringham, is doing a fantastic job taking over for Alistair Aitchison, our past chair. Over 100 recipients now receive the Kirkintilloch and Bishopbriggs Heralds since we went digital in 2011, so it's a well-valued and well-received service to my local community. But I have more than just Strathkelvin and Talking News, although that's the group that I know best. In Bearsden and Mulgai, we have BEAM, Bearsden and Mulgai, where since 1990 they have been recording the Bearsden and Mulgai Herald to be received by over 40 recipients in that area of my constituency. And of course, I've spoken before in the Chamber about Q and Review, based in Bishopbriggs in my constituency, established by a young man when he was still at school in 1982. It became a company in 1991, and now over 5,000 people across the UK receive audio tapes, audio digitised, the various, what do they call them, boom boxes? Is that the right term? Over 5,000 people across the UK who are visually impaired benefit from this company in my constituency. So I'd like to finish by again thanking Jim, congratulating Lothian Sound, and adding my voice to the fact that this is such an important resource that we all have to do as much as we can to support. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I now invite the Minister to wind up the debate? Michael Matheson, you have 7 minutes.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I, like others, offer my congratulations to Kim-Eadie in securing time for this important members' debate, and to add my congratulations to Lothian Sound talking newspapers on reaching their 25th anniversary. I'm sure members would recognise that services such as Lothian Sound can only be as strong and as successful as its volunteers and those who work there. And I would like to offer my congratulations to all of those workers, volunteers and those who have supported Lothian Sound over the last 25 years, and some of them have been able to join us here this evening. The world has clearly moved on at a very rapid pace since Lothian Sound was started in 1988, and that can be seen from the way in which people who listen to newspapers listen to them today. In 1988, tapes were sent to users of the service in the way that Kim-Eadie mentioned. However, some 20 years later, it was compact discs which were being sent out to them. However, as any good organisation should do, it should listen very closely to its service users, and they have continued to provide, through Lothian Sound, a tape version of news, but in a better quality through a digital recording. In the world of eye care and vision loss, technology has also rapidly advanced since 1988. New eye care technology and new eye care techniques mean that people who may have experienced sight loss in 1988 can keep their sight longer. Though all of this advancement in technology and these different techniques throughout that period, Lothian Sound have continued to thrive and increase their listeners by more than 10 times the original number. People with sight loss at times can feel isolated and withdrawn. Whilst they can listen to the national and international news on TV or on the radio, they can't always get the same level of detail in local news. Lothian Sound exists to allow people with a sight loss to keep up to date with their local news, the news that happens in their communities, outside their doors and in their local streets. Over the past few years as a government, we have been working closely with organisations that represent people with sensory impairment to improve the lives of these people. And since 2009, the government has provided funding to pilot a number of sensory impairment one-stop shops across the country, from the Western Isles to the borders and from Murray to Dumfries and Galloway. I've had the opportunity to visit some of these one-stop shops and seen the work that takes place locally. Unlike local services like Lothian Sound, they provide the one-stop shop that's about providing local services appropriate to the local population's needs. The local services may be started from nothing, as I saw in Stornoway, to reaching out to the black and ethnic minority communities, as explained to me in Glasgow, or a service where people who had previously felt isolated and lonely can meet and discuss what is important to them, as I experienced in Gala Shields. Like Lothian Sound, these one-stop shops are about providing for local people services and support that means something to them and continues to involve these individuals in their local community. However, that's not just where government investment ends. The government has also provided funding to the development of the first lip-reading tutors course to be held in Scotland for over 7 years. And this course was oversubscribed, and we've already identified students to begin the second course later this year, again funded by the Government. And I've also recently approved funding to provide training to frontline staff within local authorities to allow them to improve their skills in providing rehabilitation services to people with hearing, vision and dual sensory loss. And along with this, I've also provided funding to third sector partners to work with and deliver training to staff in care homes to allow staff to better identify and address hidden sensory loss, such as a loss of visual function. That in itself would allow them to then make contact with organisations such as Lothian Sound to make use of their services. And of course, the Government will also shortly issue the Scottish Sensory Impairment Strategy for consultation, a strategy which will look to improve and make more appropriate use of sensory services and how they are delivered in Scotland. It's a strategy which will take individuals right through from childhood into adult services. And it's important we use this opportunity to make sure that we build on the progress that's been made, but to continue to deliver the best possible services for those who may have a sensory loss. Presiding Officer, can I draw my remarks to a close by again offering my congratulations to Lothian Sound. Passing on some 25 years' worth of news, information and a sense of community is a great achievement. Lothian Sound is a great example of a small local organisation that represents and supports its local community. And I'm delighted to hear about the benefit that many individuals over the years have benefited from this service and the way in which MSPs recognise the real value of Lothian Sound as a key part of the Lothian community.
Thank you, Minister. That concludes Kim-Eadie's debate on Lothian Sound Talking newspaper, and I now close this meeting of Parliament.